Ask any Korean if they know this man, Kim Kil-tae, and they will say yes. He is named as one of South Korea's most notorious criminal, even at one point having his own fan club with over 2,000 members who supposedly wanted to support him and fell in love with the criminal. And the most recent case with a similar crime as Kim, even almost a lookalike in my opinion. And a lot of people are crying out, why are these assault cases in South Korea so low when it comes to punishment? Is this why a lot of people are able to get away with it and become repeat offenders? It's so important to talk about these cases. It took a long time to make this video and push it out. So remember, just a like, sharing it, discussing it with your friends, leaving a comment down below all helps to hit the algorithm, and that I know you guys want to hear more about these important cases. On March 6, 2010, a neighbor would report a strange substance found in his house water tank. They called the police, and what they found was quite crazy. It was a body found at the deep bottom of the water tank, and it happened to be a missing middle school student named Lee. She has been missing for about 11 days, and the water tank was not far from her home. This case really blew up in South Korea, and this man, who happened to be the suspect, Kim Kil-tae, became so notorious because he was a repeat offender. And you will be surprised of how many times he actually escaped the police and got out for these serious crimes. Kim was born in 1977 in Busan, and here's an infamous story about how he grew up to be. So apparently he was abandoned as a baby, and people found him at the steps of a church. He was taken into the foster care system, and that's when his adopted father met him. He only had 2 daughters and wanted to bring him a son to his household. Kim now grew up to be an elementary school student and seemed like he was really great at sports. He seemed to be pretty outgoing and getting along with other students, but it was when he reached middle school, I guess puberty, when things really changed. Now, rather it was hormones, maybe mental illness, or something happened to him that he never spoke of. Regardless, he became this really dark kid, and his parents say that's when he really shut his mouth and didn't speak much and became a loner. Somewhere along the way in elementary school and middle school, Kim found out that he was adopted. He would frequently ask his parents questions like, "Where did I come from?" once he realized he was adopted. Now, as the community and his friends knew he was adopted and knew the story that Kim was found in the steps of a church and pretty much abandoned on the streets, they thought that's why his name was Kil-tae, Kil meaning the streets. So people would call him street baby, you know, that's not your real parent. It made him seem like very weak and poor, and probably did question where he came from and his authentic self. He started to hate that name so much, he changed his name, his nickname, and told people to call him Sangtae. Kim was said to be very slim, and he was really fast. And Kim was considered to be almost like top tier when it came to the sports and gym class in his school. He was now in high school. That's when it all went downhill. He didn't listen to his parents at all, never went to school, and after only 1 year he would drop out. From 1994, since he was a juvenile, he'd be arrested for theft, burglary, assault, and various other charges, and was said to have spent most of his teenage up to adulthood in prison system. So they said that until he was like in his 30s, when this big incident happened, like he didn't even know how to use a computer or a phone, because that's how long he's been in prison system. Even in prison, he would get into multiple fights and would be eventually sent to a confinement punishment, then moved to a mental health facility. Now, since he'd been released prison as an adult now in 1997, things became even darker. His first arrest for assault attempt was in 1997, right as he got out, to a young girl. And of course, he was caught, sent to prison, but released in 2001. Now, only 1 month since he was released, he would go out into the streets again and do the same thing to a woman in her 30s coming back from work late at night. He kidnapped her, and this time he imprisoned her for 10 days inside of his own room. When Kim got drunk and fell into deep sleep, that is when the woman in her 30s was able to escape and call the police. And when he was caught, this time he was served 8 years in prison. Now, criminals like him have no remorse. They don't feel bad for what they did, and they actually blame the victim. So Kim said that, well, she gave me the most seductive eyes, and it was a mutual thing. She could have walked out on her own any time. Now, if this was in America, that would be maybe what, like 20, 25 years, 30 years, I don't know. But 8 years. Now, thank God she didn't pass away, but who knows what could have happened. But after 8 years, he walked out as a free man again in 2009. Now, this enraged a lot of people, the 8-year sentencing, because this is what the judge said. The judge said the victim didn't have any other injuries besides being assaulted. So, because she wasn't killed, because she wasn't bleeding or, arms chopped off, I don't know. That's why he only got 8 years. And basically saying that, at least at least you could walk, at least you're free now. Now it's like, okay, are you waiting for something to happen in order for laws to change instead of preventing it? And back in 2009 was not that long ago. I mean, it was still in the 2000s, and we had the technology for electric ankle bracelets like we do now for assault criminal cases. If he was released, why wasn't he notified to the entire community or had a tracking system? All of the victims from Kim's story is literally someone that he was never related to. He just snatched them from the streets. So that is even more dangerous. I do have to point, one of the reasons for a lesser sentencing in crimes like this in South Korea is that they believe in the re-education system. So they absolutely believe that a criminal can be rehabilitated, educated, and sent back out to live a better, far life. And I actually do like that mindset, right? To not give up on an individual and try to educate them and try to change them and fix them and put them out in the streets again, hoping for a better life. I think that is a very positive thing. But in cases like this, what are we going to do about offenders that can't be rehabilitated, that can't be fixed? During his rebellious stages, Kim would cut off most of his contact with his family and his sisters, and he really didn't have much friends. So there was not a lot of people that really knew him, that talked to him, knew what was going inside of his head. Again, he kept himself as a big loner. Now, going back, he was released from prison in 2009 and just set him free for him to roam around. Now, he did try to get back on his feet by going and trying to get jobs. He did get a job at a container site. We don't know if he was fired or left his job, but about a month since he kept this container job, he told his coworker, hey, I'm gonna be back, so keep some of my belongings. The belongings that he kept with his friends was really interesting because one of the things that he kept was like a diary that looked like it belonged to a kid. I mean, this is a 33-year-old man, and he didn't even have that much belongings. This is like what he had at the time. A few months since his release in 2009 and leaving his job, he would go out to the streets again and act upon his urges again, this time to a woman in her 20s, and he assaulted her, but he ended up fleeing when the police were looking for him. In this case, the victim claims that she pleaded with Kim, saying that she will never report it to anybody if he just lets her go, and he did. So you could see, at least in the pattern of his cases, he does release the victims after these horrific crimes. So the woman did obviously end up reporting him to the police, and now Kim was wanted again. Now, Kim was back in Busan, and where he lived at, apparently there were a lot of empty vacant houses in apartments, in these villas. And in Korea, there's something called the oktapbang, which is like a room you could rent out that is at the top of the villa. This was already in a very low-income household community, and oktapbangs are said to be very low and affordable just because in the summer it gets really hot and in the winter it gets really cold. I guess in this low-income household, there was a lot of empty villas, and Kim would be literally just sneaking in and being a squatter in a lot of these oktakbangs. And because the rooms are at the roof of the villas, a lot of people don't come and check up on it. It's just empty. Literally, people can be living there for months and you wouldn't notice until you go there and check. Kim would eventually hop around and found this one empty room in this villa. And later we will find out that this was a room right next to the murdered victim, Lee. When Kim was being a squatter in this villa, apparently he would stalk the family that lived right next door, and he realized that there was a young girl living there, a 13-year-old middle school student named Lee. He knew the patterns of when the parents were there and when they weren't, so Kim wasn't someone that was stupid. This guy was pretty smart in my opinion. Like, criminals are not stupid, you guys. They know how to stalk, they know how to measure time and when to do things and when to act upon things. On February 26th, Lee came home home from school and she talked to her parents at around 7 p.m. And because her parents were working out till very late at night, she just had to wait for her older brother, who was set to come about 9 p.m. When Lee's older brother finally came home at 9 p.m., he saw that his little sister wasn't there. Now, the very strange thing was Lee was almost blind in her left eye, so she really needed her glasses. But she left her glasses, wallet, phone, everything inside, and just herself was missing. Her parents knew that this was definitely not the behavior of Lee, and they decided to report her missing to the police. Kim never really went into exact details about what he did, but based on the evidences and a little pieces of what he said later on in the interrogation, we do know what happened to little girl Lee. Till this day, Kim claims that, when he gets drunk, he blacks out and he doesn't remember anything. On February 26th, Kim entered the house of Lee through the bathroom. Again, this was a very old villa, a low-income household, and apparently the bathroom was kind of linked to the outside. So they believe that is how Kim entered, especially after measuring that Lee's parents weren't there. Kim then threatened her to not make a noise and kidnapped her to a nearby empty room. In this empty villa room, that is where Kim would assault Lee. And obviously, because she was trying to run away and make noises, that is when Kim ended her life by strangulation. And then apparently Kim just casually fell asleep. And then the next day, somehow undetected, Kim would bring the body of Lee up to this water tank that was nearby, put the body in there, and somehow somewhere gathered bricks and concrete powders, poured it in, got a plastic bag, put all her belongings that she had with her, put it inside the water tank, and closed the lid. Where did you get the bricks and the concrete powders? I mean, this was completely predetermined in our opinion. As the police were looking for this little girl within the 11 days, they were going around different houses in that location, and they found evidence of somebody squatting in these empty villas, such as somebody eating ramen, somebody sleeping there with like old mattresses and things like that when it was not rented out. And they found fingerprints in one of the liquor bottles that was found inside of an empty villa, and it matched the fingerprint of Notorious Kim. So once they got a match of the fingerprints, they knew that Kim was most possibly the suspect. And within the 11 days, police actually say that they were confident that they were going to find the girl alive, because Kim, at least he never murdered anybody. He always let his victims go. So they were confident until March 6th when the girl was found dead. Now, this is the infamous wanted poster that a lot of people have seen. And by this time, the police was seeking public help to try and catch him. A criminal psychologist came up with a really great plan. Because Kim had never used a computer or phones before, it was unlikely that he was going to travel far, and he was most likely to stay in a place that he was very comfortable with. They also said, well, this guy has to eat, right? And asked restaurants and marketplaces if any of food goes missing to alert the police. And yes, indeed, a restaurant reported saying that overnight somebody came, cracked their restaurant open, and stole some food. And even the garbage, it seemed like somebody went through it. So they now knew and were confident that Kim was somewhere nearby where the incident happened. Police trimmed down to where a lot of vacant villa rooms were, and they were actually going around one by one to see if anybody was living there. And on March 10th, finally, a police would open the door to a rooftop vacant villa room and actually found him sleeping there. And he literally woke up and fought the police and ran again. Remember, Kim was said to be a very fast athlete. Or at least when he was in middle school and high school, he was a really fast guy, and he was using that, to get away from the police. And apparently this scene was like in the movies where he was like Spider-Man jumping from roof to roof, and the police were trying to catch him, and he literally came down one of the villas with the two walls like this with his hands and tried to flee as he got down. There were more policemen on the ground, and he tried to fight them, but eventually he did end up losing and he was arrested. He did have some belongings with him, although he was homeless, and one of the gloves that was really eerie and creepy that they found was this pink glove that was for about ages 9 to 10. So who did these gloves belong to? Is it one of Kim's unidentified victim, or is it something that he found in the streets just to keep it as a souvenir? I don't know. This guy is pretty smart. When he was caught, Kim would say nothing and just claim that he was drunk and he doesn't remember anything. Eventually, he was really pressured and then said, well, I did assault her. Well, I did see her, but I didn't kill her. I personally let her go after a couple hours. I didn't do that. Finally, the police were able to get DNA evidence and fingerprint evidence from the plastic bag that was found inside of the water tank. They had enough evidence. And that is when Kim said, oh, well, I blacked out. I blacked out from alcohol. The next thing I remember is the girl was laying next to me and I decided to end her life. And then I blacked out again. And then the next thing I remember is that I was walking myself to the water tank. Really interesting how criminals are able to like nitpick their memories, what they want to remember and what they don't. In the end, Kim never showed any remorse or any apology. And apparently in the interrogations, he had the audacity to ask for cigarettes, ask for what he wanted to eat during the interrogation. And criminals like him just have this cockiness and ego that they just cannot break down. And criminal psychologists who actually met and interrogated Kim says that he was just like the photos and the videos that you see him online. Quote, he was trying to hide his true self. He had a mean eye stare. He was very aggressive and defensive, and that he was very self-conscious of what others thought of him. And one thing that a criminal psychologist did with Kim that he does with other criminals to break down their ego a little bit is to put them through the lie detector test. Not to see if they're lying because they already know he did it, but they want the criminals to see exactly that we can see that they're lying, that his lies are not invisible, that his lies, that his aggressiveness, he can't hide. The sick thing is when Kim was caught, there was even a fan club, and apparently over 2,000 people joined this fan club. And in some of the forums, they wrote, I love you, Kim. Kim, fighting, rooting for you. Let's buy him delicious food in prison, and somehow became this internet infamous sensation due to his crimes. On June 2010, the court found him guilty and sentenced him to death. But of course, he appealed. And in the appeal trials, the judges actually lessened his sentence, saying life in prison. Why did the judges lower his sentencing? And apparently one of the reasons that was written was this, that Kim excused his upbringing, saying that, well, I was made fun of because I was found on the streets, that I didn't know my identity, my authentic self, because I was adopted, and I was questioning my existence. And because of that, the judges said, well, because of his upbringing, it could have made him the person he is today, and that's why they lessened his sentencing. And this comes with so much controversy, just like the Cho Do-sun's case. And everybody in Korea knows this guy, and I covered the case before. And after his horrific crimes, he was released after 12 years. He was literally released after 12 years after what he has done. And it's like, why is the South Korean court being so lenient to these criminals? And a similar case rocked South Korea recently, and I'm telling you, this guy kind of looks like him. On August 17th of 2023 in Simnindong of South Korea, a 30-year-old man named Jong would walk around in the early mornings between 9 to 10 a.m. nearby his house, nearby the park, and literally he was fishing for a victim. Now Choi was said to be a big loner as well. Apparently, he says that he never had a girlfriend, he never had any relationships, he didn't have a job, he couldn't keep a job, and he was just inside of his room doing games all day and all night. And in the mornings, he went out to the park and he found a victim in her 30s who was a teacher on her way to school. He would take her to an isolated area in the park. S assaulted her, then he even had a knuckle weapon and ended her life. When police found him, this guy even searched up the infamous high kick case. You guys know what happened to that case, right? I also covered this case. This is one of the most infamous high kick S assault cases that also ended up going to trial, and this guy only received 20 years. It's also a big thing. Choi researched multiple cases like this and copied them. Now, when Choi was arrested, you could see him literally saying whoa to like a lot of the cameras that he was seeing. A little bit of smiles and just this, again, that same cockiness, that same ego trip that like he just can't come down from. And in the trials, the witnesses say that Choi was laying back with his legs crossed, hands back, leaning, sometimes even singing, sighing whenever the defendant was giving the information of what he did, and even laughed during the courts and got frustrated at the victim's family and the judges. I'm sorry, but this is literally a loser of a loser. No job, playing games all day, can't get a girlfriend. After a horrific crime, they have to defend their ego. Because of all these outrages, there's also another case recently of a very infamous criminal relating to assault victims, and he was said to have up to 11 victims, and he was only sentenced to 15 years in prison, and he's actually due to be released, and they did find one other criminal case that he could be related to, and because of that, he is staying in prison for now. Now, I do have to say, first of all, South Korea is a very, very safe country compared to other places, but when rare cases like this happen in South Korea, it is so lenient that these reoffenders reoffend because they know they will be released from prison not long after. So I thought it was very important to talk about today's cases so that we can also have a positive change and a more serious laws for these offenders. What are the laws in your country? Leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching and see you in my next video.